The empty cupboard. Some stories begin with thunder. Jackie's began with an email. Subject line: meeting with HR 10:30 a.m. Just 8 words. But by lunchtime, her desk was cleared, her badge surrendered, and her world rearranged. The walk to the parking lot felt longer than usual. 5 years at that job, all reduced to a cardboard box. A final handshake, and the sound of her own heartbeat asking, "What now?" The day was bright, but her spirit carried rain. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Her car payment followed close behind. Groceries, insurance, and every small cost that quietly lives between the lines of a paycheck, all waiting in the shadows. When she stepped into her apartment, the silence greeted her like a mirror. The refrigerator hummed, half empty but honest: 3 eggs, a stick of butter, kale that had lost its courage, a jar of peanut butter, and not much else. In the cupboard, one small bag of flour, a little oil. And on the counter, a stack of bills that looked like mountain ranges. She sat at the table, staring at the envelopes, whispering to herself, "If I just stretch things, maybe it will be enough." But fear has a way of echoing louder than reason. She did the math, then did it again, then once more, hoping different numbers would appear if she just concentrated harder. They didn't. The gap between what she had and what she needed felt wider than faith could reach. That Sunday, she went to church. Sat in the back row, the safe row, the one for the tired and the trying. She didn't sing much. She just listened. And somewhere between the pastor's words and the sound of pages turning, a verse caught her attention, one she didn't recognize. "Do not be afraid. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry." It landed like a whisper from somewhere older than language, older than lack. She didn't know who said it or why. She just knew it sounded like hope. That night, she searched for the story and found it. 1 Kings, chapter 17. A widow, a prophet, and a miracle born out of almost nothing. The year was dry in Israel, the kind of dry that makes the earth forget what rain feels like. The prophet Elijah had spoken a hard truth to King Ahab: there would be no dew, no rain, until God said so. Crops withered. Rivers thinned into cracked mud. And the people, in their pride, began to learn what dependence really means. God told Elijah, "Go to Zarephath, a town near Sidon. I have commanded a widow there to provide for you." It sounded impossible, a widow, in famine, with mouths to feed and nothing to give. But obedience rarely consults logic before it begins walking. So Elijah went. And at the town gate, he saw her, a woman bent low, gathering 2 sticks. 2. Just enough to make one last fire, for one last meal. He called out, "Please, bring me a little water in a cup." She turned, weary but kind. Even in famine, hospitality still lived in her. As she walked away, he added, "And please, bring me a piece of bread." That stopped her. She turned, eyes tired and hollow. "I have no bread," she said. "Only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I am gathering these sticks so I may bake it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die." Can you feel the ache in that sentence? This wasn't drama. This was survival math. Her flour, her oil, her last small hope. And here stood a stranger asking for her last meal. Back in her small apartment, Jackie leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed on the screen where she'd just read those words. She whispered, almost in disbelief. He asked her for what she didn't have. The story felt too close, too familiar. Like reading someone else's diary and discovering they'd written your life. She thought about her own cupboard, her own handful of flour, her own calculations of how long she could stretch what little remained. And she wondered, if a prophet showed up at her door asking for bread, what would she say? The next morning, as she checked her fridge again, her phone buzzed a text from her neighbor, Eli. They'd only exchanged small talk before. It read, "Hey, I got a big box of oranges from my sister. If I keep them all, I'll start resenting citrus. Want some?" She smiled the first time in days. When she opened the door, there he was, holding a paper bag full of color and kindness. "Thank you," she said softly. Eli smiled. "You'd be doing me a favor. These things multiply overnight." Then, almost shyly, he asked, "Mind if I have a glass of water?" Just water. A simple request. But as she filled the glass, she remembered the widow and the prophet who had asked the same. Somewhere between ancient famine and modern fear, history was repeating. Different world. Same God. Same gentle test of faith will you give, even when you don't have much to give? Jackie handed Eli the water, watching him drink, thinking about the widow and her sticks. How close she'd been to refusing. How she'd said yes anyway. And maybe you've been there too, staring at a small jar, wondering if what's left will be enough. Wondering if your obedience even matters when the math doesn't add up. But listen, in both stories, something divine is unfolding. In Zarephath, the widow doesn't yet know that her empty jar will become a testimony. And in this small apartment, Jackie doesn't yet know that her own miracle has already begun, quietly, with a glass of water and a heart still willing to share. Because provision doesn't always arrive in abundance. Sometimes it arrives in obedience. In a neighbor's knock. In a glass of water. In a decision to give when logic says to keep. And that's where faith lives, not in the having, but in the giving. Not in the full jar, but in the willingness to pour from the empty one. The story is just beginning. The stranger and the request. Eli's knock became a rhythm in Jackie's week. Not loud, just enough to remind her that kindness often travels on ordinary feet. He talked about small things, how the weather couldn't make up its mind, how his sister's church pantry was short on volunteers, how sometimes people simply need a ride. The next morning, a note appeared under Jackie's door. There's a food pantry on Thursday. No questions, only kindness. If you'd like a ride, I'm headed that way. Eli. She hesitated. Pride argued with need, and both lost. She texted back, "Thank you. I'd like that." Far across centuries, another woman also wrestled with that small word, yes. The widow looked down at her handful of flour, then at the stranger who had asked her to share it. He didn't look like wealth or rescue, just another traveler with dust on his sandals and certainty in his eyes. Elijah said to her, "Do not be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first make a small cake of bread for me, and then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord says, the jar of flour will not be used up and the jug of oil will not run dry." Imagine standing there, barren land behind you, a hungry child beside you, and a prophet in front of you promising rain that hasn't fallen in years. Faith had to decide faster than fear. She went home and did what Elijah asked. The jar tilted and gave. The oil poured and did not stop. The smell of warm bread filled the silence that famine had left behind. That was the day provision entered her house, wearing obedience as its invitation. Eli's car was older than ambition and full of music that had outlived trends. He told stories the way some people hum, softly, habitually. At the church pantry, Jackie saw people whose eyes looked like hers, tired, cautious, hopeful. Tables lined with rice, beans, bread, and laughter that refused to stay quiet. A woman named Gloria handed her a box of groceries and said, "Rent due soon." Jackie blinked, startled. Gloria smiled. "We'll pray. God's never missed a due date yet." That night, Jackie cooked rice with garlic and a few drops of oil, and it tasted like memory, something older than hunger. She wrapped a small loaf of bread and a couple of oranges and set them aside. On a sticky note, she wrote 2 words, "Give a little." Days passed. Each morning, the widow found the same quiet miracle flour that refused to disappear, oil that tilted kindly toward full. Each evening, Elijah ate at her table, and the house that once echoed with fear now carried laughter again. In famine, God had turned her kitchen into a sanctuary. But the miracle was not just about food, it was about trust learned through repetition. Each time she reached into the jar, she remembered obedience yesterday is still feeding me today. The provision didn't come all at once, no warehouse suddenly filled with grain, no sudden wealth. Just enough for today, and tomorrow, and the day after. Daily bread in the truest sense. Sunday came again. Jackie sat in the same back row, but this time her heart listened differently. The pastor's words landed with new weight sometimes. Faith doesn't move mountains, it bakes bread. She smiled. Maybe God was teaching her how to knead belief into daily life. The next day she left the small loaf and oranges at Eli's door with a note. For yesterday's ride. Thank you. When he knocked later, holding the note like a fragile thing, she braced herself for a polite refusal. Instead, he said, "You left bread you could have kept." She shrugged. "I'm practicing the kind of person I want to become." Eli nodded slowly. "That's the same practice that saved a widow once," he said, though he didn't explain what he meant. But Jackie understood anyway. Maybe you know that practice too, the awkward generosity that feels like loss at first. Maybe you've given from an almost empty jar and wondered if heaven noticed. It does. Because in God's stories, obedience is never wasted, it's multiplied. Elijah didn't just ask for bread, he offered the widow a doorway into daily miracles. And Jackie, without realizing it, had just stepped through hers. Provision isn't always immediate. Sometimes it's incremental. A loaf here, a ride there, a note of encouragement, a box of groceries. Small mercies that stack like bricks, building a shelter against despair. That week, the widow continued to feed Elijah. Every time she poured oil, it was a conversation with God. "You remembered me again." And in a city apartment many centuries later, Jackie began to notice small mercies stacking like loaves, a neighbor's kindness, a pantry box, laughter that snuck back into her kitchen. The same God who filled one jar was quietly filling another. 2 women, 2 kitchens, 1 provider. Neither had abundance. Both had enough. And enough, it turns out, is the language God uses when teaching trust. Jackie started keeping a list, every small provision, every unexpected kindness. Not to prove God was listening, but to remind herself when fear got loud. Groceries from Gloria. Ride from Eli. Interview callback. Neighbor's oranges. Water bill extension. Each line was evidence of a pattern she was beginning to recognize. God shows up. Not always how you expect, but always when you need Him. The widow in Zarephath had learned the same lesson, one meal at a time. And now, across time and circumstance, Jackie was learning it too. The jar kept giving. The oil kept flowing. Not because of magic, but because of faithfulness, God's, not theirs. The widow had said yes when it cost her everything. Jackie was learning to say yes when it cost her comfort. And in both stories, the same truth emerged. Obedience opens the door, but God is the one who walks through it carrying bread. The jar and the promise. There is a kind of miracle that moves loudly, seas parting, fire falling, mountains shaking. And there is another kind, quiet, steady, almost shy. The miracle of enough. That was the kind Jackie was beginning to live. Each morning, she'd open the cupboard expecting to find less. Yet somehow, something always arrived, a neighbor's kindness, a small freelance payment, a bag of groceries left outside her door. It never felt like abundance. It just felt like enough. And sometimes enough is what abundance looks like in the language of heaven. She started writing down every little mercy on slips of paper: groceries, extra hour of work, rent extension, bus fare covered. She kept them in a glass jar by the sink, her own jar of flour, filled not with food but with faith. When fear whispered, she'd shake the jar and read her collection of God's faithfulness. It reminded her that the same hands that multiplied oil in Zarephath were still at work in her kitchen. The jar grew fuller each week. Not with money, not with security, but with evidence. Proof that she hadn't been forgotten. That her small obedience was being honored in small, daily ways. The widow's story was still unfolding, too. The famine had not ended, but the miracle had not stopped. Each day she reached into the jar and found enough, not too much, never too little. Her house had become an altar to daily dependence. But one day, her son grew sick. The scripture says, there was no breath left in him. Imagine the shock, after all the miracles, after all the faith, suddenly, loss again. The widow turned to Elijah in anguish. Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son? Her pain was raw, her theology cracked. This is the moment every believer faces eventually, when provision isn't enough, when the miracle doesn't cover the new crisis. When faith feels like it's being tested past its breaking point. And Elijah the prophet, the miracle worker, didn't argue. He took the boy in his arms and carried him to the upper room. There, he cried out to God, Lord my God, have you brought tragedy on this widow by causing her son to die? Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him. 3 times he stretched himself over the child. 3 times he prayed. And then, breath. The boy's chest rose, the impossible became possible, and Elijah brought him back down saying, See, your son lives. The widow wept, but this time, not from despair. This was the sound of a faith reborn. Her words echoed through time. Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is truth. What she learned that day is what every believer must learn. Provision is not just about full cupboards. It's about the God who brings life where death once lived. The jar of flour was a test of obedience. The resurrection of her son was a revelation of character. God wasn't just proving he could provide bread. He was proving he could be trusted with everything, even death. even loss, even the unthinkable. Jackie's jar was nearly empty again, not the glass one full of notes, but the real one, where bills and fears still lived. The rent was due in 4 days. Her bank account showed numbers smaller than courage. She did the math twice, then again. It didn't change. So she prayed, not a polished prayer, just an honest one. God, you said the jar won't run dry. I'm watching it closely and it's looking awfully low. The next morning, her inbox pinged, a message from a company she'd done a project for months ago. Apologies for the delay. Your payment has been processed. Not much, but enough. She smiled through tears. Okay, Lord. I see you. Later that day, she rode the bus to another interview, not her dream job, but hope in progress. Beside her sat a woman with tired eyes and shoes that looked like they'd walked too many hard miles. They struck up a small conversation, the kind born from shared exhaustion. The woman sighed. I haven't eaten since yesterday. I'll be fine. Jackie's heart thudded. In her purse was a gift card she'd been saving for her own groceries. It was her last handful of flour. She hesitated, then remembered the widow, the sticks, the prophet's strange request. She smiled and handed the card to the woman. I was going to use this, she said softly, but I think you should. The woman blinked, startled. You don't have to. I know, Jackie said. But sometimes God feeds us through each other. The woman took it, tears in her eyes, and whispered, Thank you. You just answered a prayer. When Jackie stepped off the bus, she laughed a quiet, disbelieving laugh. Because giving away her last little bit felt exactly like worship. Like the widow pouring oil for a stranger. Like faith stepping forward before sight confirms it's safe. She didn't know how her own groceries would be covered. But she knew, somehow, deeply, that they would be. Because that's how this God works. He honors the givers. He multiplies the offerings. He fills the jars of those who pour them out. In Zarephath, the widow's miracle had turned her house into a story. In Jackie's city, the same miracle was writing itself line by line, generosity opening doors that fear had closed. That evening, Jackie returned home to find an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a note in Gloria's handwriting. A friend at church heard there was a need. Attached was a check, the exact amount of her rent. Not a penny more, not a penny less. Jackie sank to the floor, holding it against her chest. Tears fell freely, not of sorrow this time, but of recognition. She didn't need to see God to know He had been in the room all along. Maybe you've prayed a prayer that sounds like hers. Maybe your own jar looks empty, your hope thin, your faith stretched. Listen, the same God who filled a widow's jar and breathed life into her son is not done telling that story. He's still writing it in modern kitchens and apartment hallways and bus rides. Sometimes his provision is a miracle. Sometimes it's a neighbor. Sometimes it's a note slipped under a door. But it is always him. The hands may change. The methods may vary. But the provider remains constant. And he has never, not once, forgotten someone who trusted him with their last handful of flour. Jackie placed the check in the jar with the other notes and wrote a new one. Rent paid. Faith proven. Then she whispered the same words that once echoed in Zarephath. Now I know that the word of the Lord is truth. Not because she'd read it in a book. Not because someone told her. But because she'd lived it. She'd poured from an empty jar and watched it fill. She'd given her last and received more. She'd trusted when trust made no sense. And God had been faithful. Every single time. The jar kept filling. The oil kept flowing. Not because the circumstances changed, but because her understanding did. She was learning what the widow learned. That provision isn't about having everything you need all at once. It's about having enough for today and trusting that tomorrow will bring its own portion. That faith isn't built in moments of abundance. It's built in the daily decision to pour out what little you have, believing that the God who sees will provide what comes next. The widow had lost her son and gotten him back. Jackie had lost her job and was finding something better, not another position, but a deeper trust. Both women were learning the same lesson. God doesn't just fill jars. He fills hearts. And when your heart is full of Him, even an empty cupboard can't steal your peace. The rain returns. Morning found Jackie in the gentle rhythm of almost normal. The job interview had turned into a call, and the call had turned into a start date. It wasn't a dream position, it was a bridge across the month. Steady hours, honest work, a paycheck with a date that made the rent less frightening. Eli showed up at her door with another bag of groceries, and that same half-smile that always looked like gratitude pretending to be casual. "Don't argue," he said. She didn't. Instead she laughed, realizing that somewhere along the way her pride had been replaced by peace. And maybe that was the real miracle. The widow still lived in a land learning how to trust again. Outside, the drought dragged on inside, her jars told a different story. Every day the flour poured as easily as breath, every day the oil caught light in the morning sun. Then one day Elijah's voice carried new words, "Go, show yourself to Ahab, for I will send rain on the land." The prophet obeyed, and soon the sky, long silent, began to darken with memory. The first drops hit the dust like applause. For the widow, each drop was proof the same God who remembered her handful of flour remembered a whole nation's thirst. She stepped out into the rain, face lifted, arms open. After years of drought, of waiting, of trusting with an empty jar, the rain had come. Weeks later, the same kind of rain touched her own window. It came soft and slow, a grey drizzle that turned the city shiny. She stood at the window and let it run down the glass, whispering, "Thank you for remembering me." At her new job, the work was steady. She learned to count blessings in paychecks, and in pauses a kind manager, co-workers who laughed easily, the hum of a coffee maker that sounded like contentment. She still volunteered at the pantry on Thursdays, handing out bread and listening to stories that sounded like her own in other accents. Each name she learned was a new verse in a song she finally understood. That faith isn't about getting more, it's about trusting who gives. When Elijah's story reached its storm, fire fell on Mount Carmel, the people turned their hearts back, and the clouds opened fully. The drought broke, the earth drank deeply. Elijah ran before the rain, the prophet of a promise fulfilled. In Zarephath, the widow stepped to her doorway and let the rain touch her palms. In the city, Jackie did the same. Two women, centuries apart, both standing in a doorway they once feared they'd lose. Both learning that the God who provides bread also provides rain. That the one who fills jars also fills skies. That faithfulness in small things prepares you for the abundance that comes after. Maybe that's you, standing at a doorway between fear and faith, wondering if heaven still keeps track of small apartments, overdue bills, or the ache that hides behind polite smiles. Hear this. The God of Elijah and the widow of Zarephath is the God of Jackie, and He is the God of you. He still multiplies what's given, still breathes life where hope runs thin, still turns rainless skies into rivers. He has never retired from the business of provision. Sometimes He fills jars, sometimes He fills hearts. Either way, He never lets the faithful go hungry for long. You may be in the drought now, waiting, trusting, pouring from a jar that looks too empty to share. But the rain is coming. The provision is already in motion. And the same faithfulness that kept the widow alive for years is keeping you too. That night, Jackie emptied her jar of paper testimonies onto the table and read them aloud. Each slip of paper a seed, each memory a small harvest. When she finished, she wrote one more note and placed it on top. Rain returned. God remembered. She looked out the window again. The city shimmered beneath the storm. Her voice was barely a whisper, but heaven heard it clear. Now I know. Not because she'd been told. Not because she'd hoped. But because she'd lived it. She had walked through the drought with an empty jar. And God had filled it over and over and over again. She thought about the widow in Zarephath, about the prophet's strange request, about the miracle that began with obedience and ended with resurrection. She thought about her own journey, the job loss, the empty cupboard, the bus ride, the gift card, the rent check. Every step had been a test. Every test had been an invitation. and every invitation had led her deeper into trust. The widow had given her last meal and received a daily miracle. Jackie had given her last gift card and received exactly what she needed, exactly when she needed it. Different stories. Same God. Same pattern. Give. Trust. Receive. Repeat. Outside, the rain continued, steady, patient, purposeful. It washed the streets clean. It filled the gutters. It watered gardens that had been waiting too long. Jackie watched a woman run through the rain, laughing, arms spread wide. She smiled. That's what provision feels like when it finally comes, like rain after drought, like breath after holding it too long. Like hope that doesn't have to pretend anymore. She had survived the empty cupboard. She had learned to trust with a handful of flour. And now, finally, the rain had come. Not all at once. Not dramatically, but steadily, faithfully, generously. The way God always works when you're paying attention. In an ancient town once called Zarephath, a woman learned that obedience could feed a nation. In a modern city, a woman named Jackie learned that generosity could feed a soul. 2 stories. 2 jars. 1 endless provider. Do not be afraid, for this is what the Lord says: the jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry. 1 Kings 17:13-14. So when your own cupboard looks thin, remember their stories. Open your hands, offer your little, and watch the God of enough turn scarcity into song. Because He is still the God who fills jars. Still the God who multiplies bread. Still the God who brings rain after drought. And He has not forgotten you. Jackie stood at her window, watching the rain, holding her jar of paper memories. Behind her, the cupboard held enough for the week. Not abundance. Just enough. And enough, she had learned, is exactly what faith looks like when it finally understands the assignment. She whispered one more prayer, not asking for more, just thanking for what had already been given. You remembered me. You filled my jar. You taught me how to trust. Outside, the rain continued its quiet work. Inside, a woman who had learned to live by faith closed her eyes and smiled. Because she finally understood. Provision isn't about the size of the cupboard. It's about the size of the God who fills it. And her God, the same God who heard a widow's cry in Zarephath, was more than enough. Your comment means a lot to me. It reminds me that these stories are reaching hearts around the world. So before you go, would you share where you're listening from in the comments? I'd love to know the places where faith is still growing, one mustard seed at a time. And if this story touched you, please subscribe to Mustard Seed Stories, where every week we share real stories of pain, healing, and grace.